Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast. Today, I have Jake Hefner on from Chargers Unleashed with me. Jake, how are you doing on this very fine draft day?
I'm doing good, Alex. I feel like this has been a long time coming between you and I because you and I have our respective shows. We're known as more of the pessimistic type. So
Yeah,
it's time for Voltron powers collide right here. And this,
yeah.
I'm happy to be here. This is gonna be a good conversation.
Yes, I think Steven and Tyler lean more towards the Dan, positive energy, and then we're
Exactly.
both in the pessimism,
Yes,
going definitely predicting 9-8 at the beginning of the season,
that's
and then
right.
we can't go for 12-5. That's just too much for us at some points. But we do have to try to be optimistic about the draft tonight. We'll see who the Chargers get at 17. So I guess I'll start with this question. Who do you think will be left on the board for them to select at 17? So who do you think goes, I guess, within those first 16 picks, and who do you think's ultimately left there for them?
I mean, I think, again, going back to our pessimistic side, I think we all have to come to the realization that there is a real possibility that Trevor Penning could still be there at
Right.
17. And if we're following the tea leaves from everything that we've read from Daniel Popper, if one of the four offensive tackles are still on the board, the belief is that they will take them. But other possibilities, a Trent McDuffie, if he happens to
Right.
fall, if we go a Zion Johnson, which would be a great retooling of the offensive line. Outside of that, for everybody who's hoping for either the Jordan Davis, the Jamison Williams, the Chris Olaves, I still think you're going to have one of those Derwin James type of moments and a lot of luck and
Yeah.
a couple missteps from other teams in order for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I think Olave is more possible, I guess, than Jameson and Davis. I think those are going to be gone. I think the floor is kind of like 15 for Jameson at this point. Seems like the Eagles are very interested in him. Jordan Davis, it seems like Baltimore's really interested in him. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think the Trevor Penning possibility is very real, although there has been some Saints rumors potentially about them taking Trevor Penning, which by all means, go for it. If you're listening down there in New Orleans. And I know Daniel Popper did have Trent McDuffie in his mock draft today, so that'll be interesting to watch as well. He's kind of the kind of corner that Staley likes in general. I guess I would say of the guys that you think will be available between Penning, McDuffie, Olave, even that trio, plus whoever else is left on the board, who would be your pick there?
If it was no trade down scenario, I'd have to go
Mm-hmm.
with Zion Johnson. I just think you
Yeah.
put him next to a Rashawn Slater, next to a Corey Linsley on that side of the line. Even having Matt Filer shift from left guard to right tackle would be a better option than just going the tackle way and drafting a Trevor Penning, in my opinion. Hopefully, you get Ode Ibushi to come back and re-sign and stabilize that right guard position. I just think for what he brings to the game, the left side of that line with Zion Johnson there would just be absolutely nasty. And he's got so much upside moving forward from college to the pros. A lot of people say Kenyon Green is still the top guard in this class. I know you guys, as well as me, we disagree. We go with the Zion pick in that circumstance. But yeah, I think that would be a solid pick. It may be a little bit too early in some people's eyes, but honestly, if the Chargers weren't able to find a trade partner to go down a few spots, I think that'd be a home run pick for them, given what had already gone off the board by that point.
Yeah, a month ago, maybe Stevens, really got us all on the Zion Johnson train. I'm like, no, you're crazy. And then it continued to ramp up. It's like, oh, okay, he's moving up the boards, and suddenly you really see him as a plug and play starter, and it doesn't sound crazy at all. You can put him right on that left side, have Ode Ibushi back at right guard, and then suddenly you're just looking for a tackle option, which you could maybe get in the third round. If you go offensive guard in the first round, which going offensive guard in round 1 and then offensive tackle in round 3 would be Stevens.
Right.
Would be Stevens' wet dream right there. He would love that. But yeah, let's talk about those trade down scenarios, because I know Tom Telesco mentioned trading down quite a lot this week, actually, in his press conferences. Obviously, there's been you should go all in for it this year and trade the first round pick next year if you want to move up and go grab an elite talent like a Derek Stingley, who Brandon Staley has kind of been in love with, or somebody else like that. What do you sort of make of both the trade up and trade down options? And which one do you think you might prefer?
I mean, I would always prefer the trade down. I've been calling for the trade down for the better part of 20 years now, and I'm still waiting for it to happen. So I'm thinking it may end up that this may be the best opportunity that Tom Telesco has to trade down. The only player that I could see them trading up for in that circumstance would be Derek Stingley, but hell, he may be off the board by the time that the Houston Texans
Right.
pick at number 3
True.
today. So, but it was a big statement for the fact that Brandon Staley went all the way to his pro day, and you saw the interaction after that. I would be very interested to see what a secondary would look like with J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr., and Derek Stingley in the
Right.
backfield. That would just be lethal. But trading down, it just opens up a lot of more options, and especially on day 2. And I talked to a lot about this with Dan on the show. But every time that Tom Telesco has made a trade up, and he has given away draft capital, especially on day 2, and you've been forced to just sit there and wait and wait and wait. And especially when you have teams like the Kansas City Chiefs who have a plethora of draft picks just in the first 4 rounds alone, and the way that the AFC West has really improved itself as a whole this year, do you really want to give away additional draft capital on day 2 and just sit there and wait all the way until day 3 until you make another selection? So to
Right.
me, if you can trade back into, say, 24, 25, maybe even anywhere just a little bit lower from there, if it nets you a second round pick and you could essentially say on paper that you got Khalil Mack for a 6th round pick next year, recoup that second. It gives you a lot of more flexibility to what you can do, and obviously a lot more opportunities to add some premier players. And on top of that, if you felt like making a trade up, say day 2, if you wanted to go acquire another 2nd round pick or another 3rd round pick, I could then see Tom Telesco being more aggressive in that circumstance. But at this slate, the way it is right now, the way that the board is predicted to fall right now with no 2nd round pick, I just can't see Tom Telesco pulling that trade up trigger.
Yeah, I can't see it either. I think it would be different if they had the 2nd round pick and you could kind of fall back on that. But then you wouldn't have Khalil Mack. So
That's right.
that's kind of the trade off there. But yeah, no, I think that the options to kind of trade down there make a lot of sense. I saw an interesting one that was kind of the Detroit one, which is a far trade down, but you get 32 and 34 and then kind of, go all the way to 79 on that one. And suddenly you have a lot of draft capital there. I don't know if they'll be willing to trade that far down, but they can kind of do, be on the Patriots side a little bit of that Kenneth Murray trade that they did 2 years ago, which is,
Yes.
we'll move down a couple spots, recoup that 2nd round pick and go from there, which I think would make a lot of sense. And if there is a year to do it and all those 15 guys that they have 1st round grades on are off the board, then yeah, no, I definitely support more so trading down this year than trading up, just because I think trading up gets very pricey, and I'm not leveraging a first next year. Getting rid of a cheap 5-year rookie contract doesn't seem like the move. But
Yes.
who I know you and Dan have been doing your top 10 rankings for all of these positions. Who are some of the sleeper guys that you like on day 2, day 3, once you start getting maybe into the back half of your top 10 lists?
I mean, it's funny because especially with you guys, for as far as you delve into some of these prospects, like to us, we don't really consider them sleepers, and
Right.
to all of the
Yeah.
real draft aficionados, they're like, oh yeah, no, he's going to go higher than
Right.
the original projections. So I've always been a Max Mitchell fan. So if the
Yeah.
Chargers do happen to go opposite offensive or different position out of an offensive line for the 1st round, maybe they could come back in the 3rd and take Max Mitchell there. Kellen Deitch, I'm very high on him as well, but he's not necessarily considered a sleeper. Tyler Goodson out of Iowa, I really like as a day 3 prospect, especially when we start getting into that running back conversation as far as when we could be selecting another person to spell Austin Eckler in the backfield. Makes sense with James Foster, former Iowa coach, was his running backs coach there for a couple of years before he ended up coming to the Chargers. So I think the familiarity there would be good. Put up a nice season last year, kind of just went under the radar, and is, in my opinion, I think he's really good as far as his running and his pass blocking goes. So those are just a couple. I would probably steer to you guys for a little bit more of the answers, because I know you guys have been a little bit deeper into the research that I have, especially when it comes to day 3. But yeah, those are just a couple names to start throwing it out there. And then again, I would actually defer to you on this because we didn't get a chance to get into the tight ends. But from what you guys have done, and obviously with Gerald Everett coming into play, is tight end a day 3 option? And if so, who is it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple tight ends they could go for on day 3. I think they might be looking for someone who's more that Steven Anderson, like fullback tight end role kind of guy. One interesting guy that we actually did in a mock draft is the brother of Cam Hayward is in this draft. He's from Michigan State, fullback tight end Connor Hayward. So he could sort of be, your little like Steven Anderson replacement if you're looking for him as like a tight end 3-4 guy. Put up a really good Senior Bowl. So, that's one of those picks that I sort of like in maybe like the 6th round or something like that. I don't think they're going to go tight end early by any means. I know a lot of people, obviously we root for an LA team. A lot of people want Greg Dulcich from UCLA. Steven has him ranked as his number 1 tight end. So that would be, I would be surprised if they took tight end that high. But he's kind of the hometown kid in that case. And I do think they actually had a top 30 visit with him, or not a top 30 visit, but a local visit of something like that. But yeah, I like someone like Cole Turner from Nevada. He's kind of like a sort of like a wide receiver / tight end, but I like him as sort of a jump ball guy. More of a receiver than a blocker, but I've said that about really all of the tight ends in this class. They all kind of struggle with blocking a little bit. But I think if you kind of are looking to develop that receiving option, then that's sort of my guy there. But yeah, I definitely think out of like the day 3 fullback tight end guys, I think Connor Hayward probably fits the best in terms of what they want. But yeah, what's a position that you think a lot of people aren't talking about that maybe they'll be surprised to see the Chargers pick so early? What's a position maybe people aren't talking about enough?
I think that, and I think that this would make Steve happy to hear this, but the Devin Lloyd selection and linebacker, because of the void that obviously with Kenneth Murray's current injury, and then of course with Kaiser White leaving to Philadelphia, I don't see the Chargers going linebacker that early. I really don't, but you have to still consider it as a very small possibility. Who was it, Kuiper, that ended up making him the selection in his mock draft? So that's probably the one that's been talked about the least, but I still think it is a distinct possibility depending on where people are starting to value the Devin Lloyds and the Kobe Deems of this draft. So I think that's the only one that hasn't been talked about enough as an outside possibility.
Yeah, the linebacker thing is really interesting. I saw with Mel Kiper, and also there were a bunch of like the PFF guys that also changed their mock drafts to have Devin Lloyd at 17. So I was just like, what's going on here? So I almost wanted to slide into Arjun's DMs and be like, what do you know that I don't? But I don't think he knows anything quite yet. But yeah, that would be a pick that obviously makes Steven very happy. I know him, Tyler, and Arjun are at the draft right now as we speak. I'd love to see video of his live reaction and them taking Devin Lloyd. But yeah, I think that's one that people aren't talking about enough just because of the weaknesses they have there. I do question Tom Telesco dipping, another 1st round pick in a linebacker so soon. But, if your first investment didn't work, try again. I guess,
That's
when
the
it comes
philosophy,
to
apparently.
I suppose so. Well, before we talk about linebacker, I guess while we get to that, what do you think of the linebacker room that they have right now in terms of Kenneth Murray and these other guys? If they are to add a Devin Lloyd in there, what does that mean for kind of Kenneth Murray and how you see this group panning out this year?
Man, I really don't know what that means if they were to invest that high in Devin Lloyd and what that would mean for Kenneth Murray. Because to me, I know we all had our theories about it as far as why Kaiser White is no longer in this locker room.
Right.
I still felt it's a little bit of both. We've both talked about ad nauseum that Staley doesn't value linebackers that much in his defense. That's been a historic fact. But I also think from the standpoint of Telesco to say that you invested enough in this guy that you traded back up in the 1st round to select him, to solidify your choosing of him. Was that also not part of the reason why Kaiser White was essentially expendable, even at the contract rate that he ended up getting? So if you take a Devin Lloyd here, what does that mean? Does it mean that Tom Telesco may finally have to admit a little bit of defeat on the Kenneth Murray selection? Who knows? To mix him into that locker room with Amon Ogbenigma, who I've heard from you guys that they're very high on, so that's encouraging for him. Not sure how that's really going to pan out. And then you have a Nick Neiman on top of that. You brought in Troy Reeder from the Rams to try and solidify some of that depth. But it may just have to be another situation where the Chargers just if they're able to build a solid defense, and if linebacker is their weakest link, to have it mirror what Brandon Staley did with the Rams back in 2020 when he was coaching that defense, you may be able to get away with that. I just don't know if they would be able to do that. You're essentially 1 year away from pulling a Matt Millen at the linebacker position, but going 2 out of the 3 if you went that direction. I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, Troy Reader was part of that former Brandon Staley defense, and Troy Reader's also part of that Rams Super Bowl team. That NFC Championship game was fun to watch with Troy Reader, and by fun I mean not fun. He got torched in that game.
Yes.
But they survived. They got past the Niners,
yes,
and then won the Super Bowl, of course. But yeah, no, I think Staley and the Rams' philosophy as a whole was, we don't value linebackers, so we're not going to quite put a premium on that. I am curious. One of the names you didn't mention was Drew Tranquil. So I'm curious to see kind of what their role for him is. Is he sort of just going to be coverage, maybe blitz package kind of guy? If he is, or is he going to be like a true linebacker too? Depends how high they are on Amen Ogbongbemiga and all these other guys. But I think going into like 2019, 2020, it was like, all right, here comes the Drew Tranquil star turn, particularly in 2020. And then first game of the season, he gets injured and just it hasn't quite been the same since in terms of that potential. So yeah, I'm curious to see what they invest in the linebackers, particularly in this draft, and them taking one at 17 would be quite the signal to send tonight.
Yes.
All right, so we've talked about what you want at 17, and I'm going to put you on the spot here now. Make your prediction for what happens.
I tell you, if we're at pick 13, Houston's on the clock, and Trevor Penning has not come off the clock yet, the perspiration will definitely start to seep through the pores. That's for sure. So again, we still have to consider that a realistic possibility. If it was me, the hope would be, Trent McDuffie's stock seems to be really skyrocketing right now. Some people think that he could be picked anywhere around Minnesota at 12. I think that would be an ideal value. I just think that he's just one of the safest and most solidest players that you could select in this draft. And in Staley's system, I think that he would be a great addition in that circumstance. I think it would have to be a toss-up between Trent and Zion Johnson, honestly, for what I think has the best possibility of being there at 17 for the selection.
Yeah, we were talking about this last night, and Tyler and Steven both kind of went the optimistic direction, and they were like, yep, it's going to be Trent McDuffie. I'm like, sign me up, but I think it's going to be Trevor Penning. And I do still think it deep in my heart. Maybe that's just the pessimist in me. But let's talk about Trevor Penning a little bit. I know that there's obviously a lot of pessimism in the Chargers community about him. There's some, people that are optimistic and are like, hey, look, everyone said Justin Herbert wouldn't pan out, that he did. What's to say the same can't happen for Penning? What are your thoughts on Trevor Penning as a prospect, and sort of what would your immediate reaction be if he was kind of taken here?
Immediate reaction may be something I'm not able to say. But I mean, everything from measurement standpoint, physicality standpoint, even from an athletic guy that big, he checks all those boxes. I totally get it. And if some people are making the argument to say, oh, well, he's not going to be playing left tackle, you move him over to right, he's going to have a lot more success. Is that possible? Absolutely. But just from a technician standpoint, is he going to be able to keep his emotions in check? I mean, what was it, 5 personal foul calls that he had just had in this last college year alone? I think it was 16 penalties through 12 games. I mean, is it something that can be cleaned up? Sure. But if you're drafting at 17, to expect to have an impact player that's going to come in on day one and be able to make a huge impact for you, I just don't see the value of Trevor Penning being there. Now, if the Chargers traded back and you saw another 6 teams pass on Trevor Penning, I may be able to stomach that selection a little bit more if that's the case. But at 17, I just cannot see that value equating to Trevor Penning there.
Yeah, I can't really see it equated to Trevor Penning either, but I know there's, the mock drafts are all over the place. There's been some Trevor Penning, there's been some Trent McDuffie, there's been some Olave recently, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was anyone, but I'm curious to see if they have anything lined up, obviously, after the draft as well. Could there be like a stopgap option, like a Riley Rife or something like that? If that's possible, then maybe you don't go Trevor Penning and you kind of wait. But just based on how Telesco's drafted for need the last 2 years, in particular, I kind of see him going there. But I have no idea if he's on the Chargers board or not, or if they're very high on him. And yeah, no. So, all right. And let's see what else we got here. Round 3, round 4, round 5. Give me a couple prospects you like for the Chargers there.
Round 3. So let's say if they decided to go linebacker in that type of scenario, if for some reason that Chad Muma was still on the board,
Yeah.
he probably won't be, but
Right.
damn, that would be a dream. God, round 4. See, this is where people have started to tease the running back conversation. And
Yeah.
even some people have teased it in round 3. And I just don't see it being that higher priority, especially if you're only keeping your first round pick and your third round pick. I can't see that going any higher than day 3. But there's a plethora of running backs. I mean, basically just take your pick. I mean, for anybody that you're saying to come in and take and spell Austin Eckler, whether it's Jerome Ford, gosh, I was just actually losing the guy's name, but the other one that I had mentioned, Tyler Goodson, there was Damian Pierce. I still think if you choose to go for him in round 4, he may end up being off the board already. I think his draft stock has elevated quite a bit. And then I'm trying to think of positions that they may double dip on. So if you do go offensive lineman, I could see them actually doing 2 just from a depth standpoint. Defensively, if you miss out on a Trent McDuffie in round 1, I could see that as a conversation because corner is also sneaky deep in this draft. So day 3 could be another target for them there. Other options in round 3, obviously, maybe a Zion McCollum is there in round 3. Oh God, I'm totally just blanking on some of the names today. I apologize. But yeah, certain positions to double down on, I could definitely see corner and offensive line being the ones that they would do there, if not defensive line on top of everything, of course.
Yeah, or they could even go if they wanted to go in like a safety corner hybrid direction, right? Daxton Hill's kind of there,
Yes.
in the first round in theory, and then maybe you go get a pure corner later in that sort of Michael Davis role. I think that would kind of be possible. But yeah, I think double dipping is more likely than than people think, especially because they have 10 picks. I do hope they go running back on day 3, just because I do think
They
that
better.
removes some juice. Yeah. I can't put myself through another season of Larry Roundtree and Josh
Joshua
Kelly backing
Kelly.
up Austin Eckler. That would be tough for me to watch. But I love Jerome Ford. He's my running back 1 personally. I know when we did the show originally, Tyler actually had him as his running back 14. He's corrected that and he put him at running back 7 now. So I appreciate
Okay.
it. He's moved him up a little bit.
To talk about that for a second, because I know you guys always look for the connections, obviously, as it relates to Staley's style, coaching, everything like that. And I apologize, I had said James Foster earlier on in the show, but Derek Foster, Coach Foster. What are the ones? I mean, obviously you're high on Ford, but I mean, any other ones that you guys have talked about that you just think, just as far as the fit goes of the scheme that they want to run, that is just it would be seamless, flawless, good fit.
For running backs, I'm not quite sure if there's like an obvious fit. Obviously, there's the Goodson one, from Iowa. Other than that, I don't know if there's any clear cut ones. The big coaching connections, like prospect of this, kind of like experience has been like Trent McDuffie, just because I think how he fits in Staley's scheme, how he can kind of move around, like take that Chris Harris role immediately, just do whatever he wants to on the field. I think that would kind of fit there. And I know I'm not quite sure off the top of my head what the coaching connections were, but I know there were some there for him. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. So yeah, and obviously like someone like Chris Olave has like the local connections down here a little bit. Was originally from San Diego, I think, something like that. So that could always be a possibility. But yeah, the connections always do run deep in the draft, and suddenly you're talking in the 7th round, and you're like, oh, this guy actually went to Brandon Staley's daughter's dance recital. Like that's where you end up. So
Right.
you can't go too far without psyching yourself out. But thanks, man, Jake. I appreciate you coming on. I hope you have a good draft day. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience off with?
I mean, hopefully we'll come back here tomorrow and we'll say the Chargers got a home run in round 1. Regardless of whether they're selecting at 17, regardless if they're trading down and still hitting a home run, let's just hope that we come back with a positive attitude tomorrow. We can get into day 2 and get on with the rest of this draft weekend.
All right. Yep. Have fun at your draft party, Jake, and I'll talk to you guys later tonight during the
All
draft
right.
stream. So see
Thanks,
ya.
Alex. Appreciate it.